Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch the interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me. Hello and welcome to a special interview for The Wire, an essay in Caravan magazine which quotes extensively from General Naravane's so far unpublished memoir, 4 Stars of Destiny, has stalled the Lok Sabha for the last few days. Every time Rahul Gandhi attempted to quote from the essay, the speaker stopped him. So today I have with me the author of that essay, one of India's most highly regarded strategic affairs analysts, a consulting editor at Caravan magazine, and a lecturer at Yale University, Sushant Singh. What does General Naravane reveal about Prime Minister Modi's handling of the India-China crisis of 2020? What is the core concern that has prevented the publication of the former army chief's memoirs? And why has the media made little effort to cover General Naravane's revelations, even though the manuscript has been unofficially circulating for almost 2 years? Those are the key issues I shall put to Sushant Singh, who joins me live from America. Sushant Singh, when he attempted to quote from your Caravan essay on General Naravane's book, 4 Stars of Destiny, Rahul Gandhi was stopped by the speaker on the grounds that the book is unpublished. The implication is that the quotations in your essay are unverified. So let me start by asking, how can you assure the audience that what you report of General Naravane's book is accurate and it's correct?
Firstly, Karan, thank you. Thank you for inviting me for this interview. To come to your question, it's pretty clear. General Naravane has publicly spoken about it and stated it that he has written the book and the manuscript is with the Defense Ministry. I remember even last October at one of the Lit Fests he had said it. A lot of his videos speaking about his manuscript are out there in the public domain. Moreover, PTI had run one small extract, one part of what I have covered in the essay in December 2023, January 2024, and that thing was never withdrawn or taken away, which almost validates what I have reported now, what I've analyzed now. Moreover, this thing has been out there for now a week almost, and within a week nobody has rebutted or denied. Neither General Naravane nor the Defense Ministry, nor the publishers have denied that this manuscript doesn't exist, or General Naravane has not said this. Moreover, I did drop an email well in time, both to the general, to the Defense Ministry, and to the publishers, to actually before the story went live on the Caravan, and none of them responded to my emails saying that this was not there. They did not stand by the manuscript, or they denied the manuscript. And finally, which came as a surprise to me, Mr. Gandhi actually displayed a hard copy, published copy of the book. So essentially, the book is published but not released in a certain sense. So I think there's enough evidence to suggest that all the quotes that are there are from General Naravane, and neither General Naravane nor Defense Ministry nor the publisher have ever denied that.
You said a very important thing in that answer. You said you dropped an email to the Defense Ministry before the essay was published in Caravan magazine to alert them that this was about to happen. Have I understood correctly?
So it's not about the alert. You every time you do a story, because you want to be fair to the people whom you are commenting on, and you want to get an update on the latest situation. I dropped a set of questions to, of course, set of different questions to all three of them. saying, what is the position of this? Have you reviewed the book now? When is it going to be reviewed? What is the date on which it's going to be published? So that I was clear before I wrote the essay. If there was an update, I would have put an update there. But they never responded to those emails.
So the defense ministry knew the essay was coming out. It wasn't a surprise to them.
In a sense, they would, if they would have paid attention to that email and they would have taken it seriously, they would be aware.
All right. Let's then come to the contents of your essay for Caravan magazine, because that, I think, is the most important thing I want to discuss with you today. You reveal, quoting General Naravane's book, 4 Stars of Destiny, that on the 31st of August 2020, when Chinese tanks were advancing towards Indian positions at Rechinla and General Naravane was desperately seeking clear orders, Defense Minister Rajnath Singh told him, after speaking to Prime Minister Modi, that do whatever you deem appropriate. The exact words quoted in the book were, Jo uchit samjho wo karo. Isn't this an extraordinary abdication of constitutional responsibility by the Prime Minister? How can a Prime Minister leave it to the army chief to do as he seems fit when it could lead to war with China?
Oh, definitely, Karan. I think it's truly extraordinary that a prime minister, through his defense minister, can convey to the army chief that decision to start war with China, possible war with China, could be left to the army chief. If you go further in the essay or even in the manuscript of the book, General Naravane decides the kind of factors he is considering. He's considering the factors like that there's COVID going on right now. India's economy is not in great shape because of COVID, and even otherwise, Pakistan and China may collude together. How will the Americans behave? Will you get the kind of logistics and other support that you need from Russia to wage a war, to execute a war? Now, these are the questions of diplomacy and economy which an army chief is not supposed to decide. These are the questions which the government is supposed to decide. There's a cabinet committee on security. There's a prime minister. Going to war is a political decision. How it is to be executed tactically, operationally, that is an army chief's decision. That is the military's decision. Military can have inputs into about executing a war, that we can't fight for 10 days, or we don't have the wherewithal, etc., etc. But the decision to decide a war or to take an action which could lead to significant war with a powerful country like China has to be the political decision. And it is truly extraordinary. I completely agree with you. It is truly extraordinary that the prime minister passes a message through his defense minister saying, and he doesn't even speak himself. He tells his defense minister to pass a message, Jo chit samjho wo karo. Truly extraordinary. Yes.
And I want to underline for the audience that strategic political decision, whether or not to take action that could lead to war, was left to the army chief. And it was a decision that was, in a very real sense, way above his pay grade.
Oh, absolutely. The decision to go to war with another country is not purely a military decision. It has to be a political decision, and the fact that the political leadership did not take that decision but pass it on to the army chief to take that decision is unbelievable in any democratic setup. We are not Pakistan, where Asim Munir is the most powerful leader and decides where Pakistan will go to war with Afghanistan or India. We are a democratic country, and a democratic country since 1947. And in our system, it is the prime minister who has to decide, not the army chief or any military leader.
And the failure to take that decision, the prime minister himself, and leave it to the army chief instead, shows up the prime minister in a very poor light. Or am I mistaken?
No, I completely agree with you. To me, it amounts to abdication of responsibility, and in any serious setup, this would lead to kind of questions where the prime minister would be completely embarrassed and would find it difficult to answer. Karan, think of well, let's say the United Kingdom or England. Would the prime minister be allowed to get away with this kind of a thing? Look at what happened after Iraq to Tony Blair. The public reputation, is destroyed and completely goes into mud. You can't take these kind of calls. You can't leave this to the army chief or any military chief to decide whether you're going to take some steps which could lead to war with China.
And it also undermines the image the prime minister has assiduously built up, that he is a strong, decisive leader. Here, he's not being strong. He's not being decisive. He's passing the buck.
Yeah, I think, but that's a lot of PR. We know that's a lot of PR, which is done using television, films, media, journalists. We can go on and on about it. The fact of the matter is that when the crunch time comes against a powerful adversary like China, when when the political leadership needed to stand up and take a call, it did not take a call. It passed the buck. I don't know what General Naravane himself says. They handed me a hot potato. Now, what more can be? What can be more damning than that? That hot potato should have been in the Prime Minister's basket or in the Cabinet Committee on Security's basket, not in the General's basket.
Let's then come against this background to what action General Naravane did take. Instead of firing artillery, General Naravane ordered Indian tanks to move nose down on the pass, guns pointing directly at the Chinese tanks at close range. He calls it maximum deterrence without crossing the firing threshold. And the question I want to put to you is this: was this brilliant tactical thinking under pressure, or was this a gamble that could easily have gone wrong and might have triggered the very war we wanted all to avoid?
Yeah, Karan, this is a counterfactual. Who knows what could have happened? But perhaps, because he chose not to fire, the PLA tanks could have continued walking up and could have destroyed the Indian post had he chosen not to fire. So I think these are decisions which only in hindsight you can say whether they were right or wrong. And in this case, the decision was wrong. Karan, please do understand.
You're saying the decision was wrong in this case?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying only in hindsight you can say whether a decision was right or wrong. But because in this case the decision worked, because there was a conflict was averted and the PLA tanks stopped. So it seems to have worked fine. Karan, please remember one thing in this case. Most people tend to misunderstand what firing of medium artillery guns on PLA tanks means. India has never destroyed a PLA tank ever in its history. The last Pakistani tanks we destroyed were in 1971. The last time Chinese lost their tanks was in 1979 against Vietnam. Shooting an adversary's tanks is a very high degree of escalation. It is not like, you kill a soldier with a rifle. This is not about shooting a rifle on a soldier. We are talking about the highest caliber of weapon that is available to any military commander, which is the medium artillery gun in the field, which could be Bofors, M777, whatever it may be, and opening it against an advancing Chinese adversary's military tank, an armored tank. That is something which is very escalatory. I think most people don't seem to realize that it is not like somebody opened a pistol and shot someone. And I think this is a disservice which Bollywood has done by showing that whether you're firing tanks or whether you're firing pistols, it's the same. It's not the same. This was an escalation of a very high level. After medium artillery, the army commander or the chief actually has nothing except to calling the Air Force if he wants to escalate further. Do remember that.
If I understand your answer correctly, although General Naravane's decision was a bit of a gamble, it was the right gamble, because had he fired on Chinese tanks, he would have immediately escalated to war.
Yeah, it could have easily escalated. I don't think the Chinese, my own assessment is the Chinese would not have taken it lying down, the fact that their tanks would have been destroyed. Look at what they had done in Galwan in June 15. The fact that even when they lost some of their soldiers, they really came out very hard and brought in more people, etc. So it would have definitely, to my mind, it would have been escalatory. But who knows what the reality was.
Now, there are also, it emerges from your essay, two opinions of what the Indians did. Some military leaders have claimed that India's operation in August 2020 was a pre-planned retaliation against China, but General Naravane's memoir suggests it was actually a response to Chinese tanks and soldiers moving for a fresh ingress onto the LAC. One explanation makes India look strategic and bold. The other makes us look reactive and defensive. So I'm going to ask you, what is the reality between the two?
So if you go by General Naravane's memoirs, it's pretty clear that it was not a quid pro quo operation. So the narrative which most of us, including me, have believed before I read the memoirs was that the Indian political and military leadership was waiting for an opportunity to put the pressure back on China. And in August, after having prepared, decided to walk onto the Kailash range on the north bank of Pangong and the south bank of Pangong and put the Chinese under pressure and bring them onto the negotiating table. But when you read those memoirs, General Naravane's memoirs very clearly, very carefully, it clearly shows that the PLA had started moving towards the south bank of Pangong and towards the Kailash range. And to stop them from moving, it is that General Naravane passes orders to move his own forces to stop the PLA. So it was a kind of a response to another Chinese egress, not a well-designed politico-military move to put pressure on China. But what I should also add is, but the fact that the Indian army had the resources available there and they had the plans available to do this in case PLA did it. that allowed them to execute this operation very well. But it is a fact that it was not a quid pro quo operation. That much is pretty clear from the memoir. It was an operation done in response to the PLA coming again onto the south bank of Pangong and Kailash Range, and to stop them. That's where all this thing about the Chinese tanks and the Chinese soldiers walking in happens at that point in time.
Would I be right in saying that if there are two interpretations or versions of what the Indians did, it makes sense to go with the army chief's version?
Yeah, unless we get more details, more facts officially, unless the government comes out with a statement and says something else which counters General Narvane's version, we will have to go by the army chief's version.
Now, your second revelation from General Narvane's book is about what actually happened at Galwan in June 2020. It's revealed that the Chinese side pitched its tents nearly a month earlier, and at first, Northern Command and 14 Corps in Ladakh did not consider that an issue at all. But on June 15, they were asked to go and pitch tents at the same place in Galwan, which led to the clashes where 20 Indian soldiers, including Colonel Babu, died. That, to me, as an outsider, seems very different from what we've so far been told about the Galwan clash.
Well, yes, true. I think, and that's what most people are missing out on, because there was so much political focus on one line, which was in the opening part of my essay. Most people have overlooked these other revelations, which are equally important. And I'm thankful that you have raised these revelations. What really happened at Galwan, where 20 Indian soldiers died, is equally important. We were not aware that the Northern Command and 14 Corps were fine with those tents being pitched there, because they believed that those tents would get washed away during when the water levels in the river rose. And it was Delhi, General Naravane and Ajit Doval, who were unhappy with this. General Naravane doesn't mention in his memoir who passed the orders to go and pitch tent on June 15th, but it is clear that those Chinese tents were there till for nearly a month. And on June 15th, somebody passed orders to the Indian Army to go there and pitch tents. And when the Indian Army goes to pitch tents, that's when the Chinese attacked them. And then, as per General Narvane's version, Colonel Babu, who got the Mahavir Chakra, who was the commanding officer, he goes to actually diffuse the situation, which is very different from what his citation for the Mahavir Chakra, etc., or what the popular version is. General Narvane's version is that he went to diffuse the situation where he was attacked, and because the Chinese were better prepared and they had APCs and better terrain on their side, they could bring in more people and hit harder, and that's how India lost those 20 men. The point I'm trying to make is that we were not aware that this has already happened in May, where these Chinese had pitched their tents, and the Indian side was aware that those tents had been pitched, and both the Northern Command and the 14 Corps in Ladakh were almost kind of okay with those tents being there, and were not wanting to do what was finally they were ordered to do.
And what General Naravane has done in his book is to open our eyes to an entirely new understanding of how Galwan happened. That's the clear point in that revelation, isn't it?
Exactly. On that, it doesn't take away the fact that the Chinese provoked the Indians by pitching those tents without agreement from the Indians. That doesn't take away that what the Chinese did was wrong. But the fact that this had happened a month ago, and thereafter the clash happens on June 15, completely changes the context and the information that is available to us as to how this episode happened. It didn't happen over 2 days or 3 days. There's a long arc before this. There's a long gestation period before this clash happens.
Now, as you also reveal in your essay, General Naravane is damning in his indictment of local commanders in Ladakh who were underprepared and tried to underplay the situation. He says being unprepared once is fine, but being unprepared on subsequent occasions was just not acceptable. Doesn't this suggest systemic failure? Here, isn't the blame on the military as an institution? It's not a question of political interference.
No, I completely. This actually, to me, was the biggest surprise, that he was pretty scathing in a couple of paragraphs about the local commanders' behavior in May. He says he made a sudden trip to Ladakh, and then when he spoke to them, he was surprised about how unprepared they were, despite having seen what had gone on earlier. He's also critical of the formation, by which he means 14 Corps not sharing information within itself, which again shows a breakdown of communication, poor leadership, whatever you wish to call. But the fact that this points to systemic weaknesses within the military, Yeah, I would agree with your characterization in this case. It does point to and this is irrespective of what the political leadership was doing or not doing, and this is purely on the military. And the fact that that's no one less than the army chief is himself saying this should worry us a lot and should lead to a lot of introspection and reviews as to why this happened and why and how it should not be repeated.
And once again, I'll underline the fact that this is new. This
absolutely.
criticism by the army chief
Yes.
of the army has not been seen and known before.
Yeah, no, the criticism of the army by the army chief, and this has not been reported by these small extracts run by PTI or anyone. Because Karan, I see a lot of people going on, oh, this has been reported earlier. No, this has not been reported earlier. What happened in Galwan, what happened here, the comments of the army chief, they've never been reported. This is the first time that we have put them out at the Caravan magazine.
Now, at the end of August, General Naravane asked permission from the government for Indian soldiers to open fire to stop Chinese soldiers who were coming in human waves. Why was the government unwilling to grant that permission? And what were the restrictions it imposed even then?
So, Karan, I don't know what were the reasons why the government was not keen on granting that permission. I think, to my mind, logically, it would be that they didn't want to provoke the Chinese. They didn't want to escalate. Some people would say they were scared of really going down that path because the Chinese could retaliate. That could be the reason. India would want to quickly get over with the crisis. That's why they might be taking a very this kind of a view. But the army insisted. And in fact, there's a telling line which I couldn't get into the essay, was that he sends the DGMO immediately to inform the Northern Command even before the meeting could change their mind. The moment they say yes, he says, I inform the Northern Command so that they could not change their mind. So that was the level of discussion and debate that took place. The restrictions that the China Study Group imposed on the army was that you will only fire in self-defense. You will only fire if your physical security is threatened. Only that particular detachment will fire, and no one else will fire. And you will fire whatever is minimum that is required. So these were very, very strong restrictions. These were almost like you fire for effect. You know what they call Hawaii fire, almost like cops do. It's almost like you are saying that you do very, very limited firing and only fire for effect, only fire to demonstrate to kind of deter, but not fire for effect. Not fire for effect, but only fire to kind of demonstrate and push the Chinese away. The army's argument was the Chinese were confident that the Indians will not open fire, and they were walking in human waves. They were coming non-tactically and human waves, and it really and because the army had been pilloried for not opening fire on June 15 in Galwan, they didn't want to be pilloried again for not opening fire. And that's why they were telling the political leadership that we should be allowed to open fire. But I was surprised that these were the kind of restrictions that were imposed on the army, especially by a government which claims to be very bold, very nationalist, giving a free hand. This is not free hand. If people are trying to tell me that Jo Uchit Samjho Karo is a free hand, then not allowing the army to open fire or put such strong restrictions on the army for opening fire clearly tells you that there was no free hand. This is timidity, in my view, political timidity, and this is something which we should acknowledge and understand.
I'm a layman, but would I be right in saying that far from giving the army a free hand, the government was effectively tying one hand of the army behind the army's back?
Oh yes, it is actually taking operational control. Why should the neighboring detachment not fire if soldiers are coming from this thing? Army is always in an army deployment in field, Karan, people fire from all sides. It's not only that post which is under attack is fire. And why would you only do minimum fire, or why only fire when in self-defense? You could fire for various reasons. These kind of operational restrictions being put on the army as to how it is going to do even tactical operations, lower level operations, is quite surprising and quite worrying in a certain sense.
And once again, Sushant Singh, this is new. This is an aspect of the government's handling of the China crisis, which is not bold, decisive, and strong, but fairly restrained, weak, and timid. And this is something that hasn't come out earlier.
Oh yeah, this has definitely not come out earlier. Nobody has covered this earlier, and this, to me, my mind, is actually as damning as the Jo Uchit Samjho Wo Karo thing, because it clearly tells you that the political leadership is arguing with the army, and after army's insistence, it is only allowing them to open fire, but with very severe restrictions, which is not what the kind of narrative that we have been told about this government or about the Prime Minister.
Now, you also quote General Naravane to reveal that when the corps commanders' meetings between the Indian and Chinese sides started, the External Affairs Ministry did not agree to the army recording the minutes of the meeting on the grounds that border talks came under the remit of the External Affairs Ministry. This, if I understand correctly, did not go down well with General Naravane.
So he says that this has consequences because you could not tell the Chinese what you had agreed upon. So there was nothing to hold on to. You have a meeting for 12 hours, 14 hours, 16 hours. Something is agreed upon, but because there's nothing on the paper, you can't go back to the Chinese and say, "Oh, you have gone back on your word," or "You have not followed what was decided." So these meetings eventually became an exercise in nothing. It's only in the 9th meeting that the two sides agree to sign something. When I think JS, a joint secretary from MEA, is included in the co-commanders thing. But it is a big surprise to me that the political leadership allowed it to happen. Having agreed to the Chinese suggestion of having a co-commander level meeting, to allow this to happen and no minutes to be kept while these meetings were happening. So these meetings essentially, to my mind, seems were an exercise in futility. You were going over them again and again, but you had nothing to hold the Chinese to say that we had discussed this last time, you had agreed to it. What have you done so far? You couldn't do that because you had no minutes, because the foreign ministry says that this is our remit and you should not be signing those minutes. Then in that case, foreign ministry should have done the talks. The government should not have agreed for co-commander level talks. It should have said that talks will only be done by the foreign ministry. Then
would I be right in saying this is lack of clear thinking on the part of the External Affairs Ministry?
I think this is lack of thinking on part of the political leadership. The political leadership should have been more involved. So Karan, there are two options. One is you say, okay, you sign the minutes. Okay, or you don't want to sign army to sign the minutes. You say the meetings will only be conducted by the foreign ministry. The army will not conduct these meetings. But if you agree to the army conducting those meetings, then you should have agreed for the minutes, because you've wasted so many months with these meetings while having nothing to show for to force the Chinese to agree to what they've already agreed upon.
Now, in your analysis of General Naravane's revelations, the creation of buffer zones after disengagement, where both sides counter patrol, is also, you believe, disadvantageous to India. Can you explain to the viewers how and what has India lost as a result of these buffer zones?
So, Karan, because the government doesn't use the word buffer zones, you saw Jaishankar in Parliament, use a very a kind of a 3 sentences to say, but not trying to say that these are buffer zones. So, actually, it's nice that General Naravane has clearly mentioned that these are buffer zones. Now, what the revelation in the book is that these buffer zones. Okay, let me explain it a bit. Karan, the Chinese walked ingressed into what was supposed to be the territory controlled by us, and they parked themselves there. The Indians moved there and stopped the Chinese. They are in an eyeball-to-eyeball situation at that point in time. Now, when we decided to do disengagement and create these buffer zones, the reference point from which the distance was calculated, 5 kilometers in this case, was calculated from where the Chinese had come to. So there were 2 reference points. There was no single reference point. The Chinese would go back 5 kilometers from to the point they had come to, what is called as their reference line, and the Indians will go back 5 kilometers from where the Indians were now there. So because Chinese were already on the Indian side, this buffer zone is almost everything was on the Indian side. So when you are creating a buffer zone or a no patrol zone, because the Chinese have ingressed and you accepted that as a reference point, you have conceded the territory on the Indian side. You have also validated the Chinese claim by putting something in writing and saying that this is a reference line. The Chinese are not supposed to be there. How can you accept this as a reference point? And that's something which I find pretty disturbing.
And does General Naravane in his book accept that the buffer zones meant that India was actually technically vacating what was its own territory?
No, he doesn't. He's full of praise for the fact that they devised a new kind of innovation of 2 reference points, etc., etc. But he does mention that this could have longer consequences. This could have longer consequences in terms of border negotiations, which is something which I think is significant. Although it's almost a throwaway phrase in his book.
But if you read between the lines, that's what he's in a way hinting at without saying it. Or am I wrong?
I don't think so, Karan. He's actually there are a couple of throwaway phrases which give it away. But when you read it carefully as to what the facts are that India creates buffer zones, but the reference point is from where up to the Chinese have come in, and that means that because Chinese had come into the Indian territory. Once you put 2 and 2 together, you can very clearly say that. He doesn't go out to say that we have lost territory in that sense.
Let's at this point come to what Prime Minister Modi told an all-party meeting in June 2020, when, if you translate his words into English, he effectively said, neither has anyone intruded into our territory nor taken over any post. General Naravane's account clearly, as you point out, contradicts this. When will we come to know the truth about how much territory India has lost control over in eastern Ladakh?
I don't think, Karan, we'll ever come to know how much territory we have lost control over. If you're asking me to read from General Narvane's book, he says that this is a moot point because the LAC is not fixed, the boundary is not decided. So how can we talk about what quantum of territory we have lost? But clearly, control over territory we have lost. But clearly, there are areas which we cannot patrol because of buffer zones or other reasons, which means that we have lost certain territory. And if we have not lost any, if we had not lost any territory, then the government would be doing briefings, government would be taking journalists there, government would be doing everything, but nothing of that sort has been done. No questions have allowed to be have been asked. Why doesn't the government agree to a debate in Parliament and have the debate and clear the air if there's nothing like that? But it seems to me that there is a lot there to hide, particularly on how much territory control has been lost. What is the kind of disagreement, or what is the kind of agreements that we have entered into with the Chinese? What their strategic consequences are? What the events were? What the kind of political role was? I think all those things needs to be discussed and debated, and that would probably tell us how much territory India has lost control over in eastern Ladakh.
You make a very good point. Although we will probably never get a clear, full, official idea of how much territory India has lost control over, the government's behavior, failure to take journalists to see what happened and to see the line, failure to discuss the matter, or refusal to discuss the matter in Parliament is all suggestive, isn't it?
Oh, definitely. It clearly seems to me that there is a lot to hide, and that's why the government is hiding that.
Now, the foreign minister apparently told General Naravane that delaying a resolution of the border crisis would benefit India, that we should, in other words, dig in for years if need be, as we did in 1987 at Somdurongchong. But you write that China is building infrastructure 4 times faster than India. Therefore, isn't delay actually helping China solidify its gains?
Yeah, I don't agree with the analysis which Jaishankar tells General Naravane. Jaishankar's analysis is that this could be like 87, it will change the status quo. But 87 was a very different time, Karan. 87, India and China were at the same level economically, geopolitically. Perhaps India was stronger than China at that point in time. And we are still in the period of Cold War. 2020 is not that. 2020, China is a much bigger economy than us. 5 to 6 times bigger economy than us. China has more political power. Trump is calling it G2. The gap in power between India and China is so much that the advantage will only go to China. And the figure of 4 times more infrastructure or 10 times more infrastructure, 4 times more infrastructure pace of creation of infrastructure, and 10 times more infrastructure on the border is in the Economist story by Shashank in the December 2025 issue. And the government of India actually allowed him to travel to Eastern Ladakh, perhaps invited him and gave him access to those areas. And he has said this, quoting officials and quoting what he has been told, that the Chinese pace of construction of infrastructure is 4 times more than India's on the line of actual control, which essentially validates my argument that if you prolong this, and if your adversary is much more powerful, more stronger than this, has more resources, they will consolidate their advantage, and you would put to a disadvantage, which is what clearly seems to have happened in this case.
Now, let me at this point, Sushant Singh, come to a couple of issues that your essay raises and a couple of issues that need to be addressed before I thank you for joining me. What do you think is the core concern that has prevented the publication of General Naravane's book? Is it operational secrecy? Is it political sensitivity? Or could it be something else?
Karan, my sense it is political sensitivity. There's a desire to control information, definitely. Operational secrecy could be the excuse that could be used, but I think, to my mind, it is because operational secrecy has not stopped us from publishing information about Operation Sindoor, which happened just last year. You have so many retired military officers, etc., writing books with Army and the Air Force and the political leadership giving them full access. I have seen other hagiographic accounts of other events, whether of 2016 and 2019, with the government giving them full access, with the Army giving full access. So it's not about operational secrecy, as long as the political leadership is portrayed in great light. What I think is this one is politically inconvenient for the government. This one is something which politically embarrasses them, and that's why its publication has not been allowed. If this memoir showed Mr. Modi and the political leadership in a great light as bold, dynamic, and who had defeated the Chinese, perhaps that this book would have been published by now.
So, in other words, the government and the Prime Minister, perhaps in particular, are saving their face.
In a sense, yes. Otherwise, if it was about operational secrecy, then how are books about Operation Sindoor being allowed to be published, or other military operations which India has conducted, and only this book is not being allowed? Clearly, clearly this is about politics, not about the military or the operational secrecy.
Now, you raise a second very important point. You write that the media has made little effort to interrogate General Naravane's revelations, and this is despite the fact that his manuscript has been unofficially circulating for 2 years. How do you explain the extraordinary, how shall I put it, media silence or reticence?
Karan, you are a journalist. You know this as much as I do. I think the state of Indian media, Indian journalism is not hidden from anyone. And yeah, it's a surprise that the manuscript was first couple of extracts from the manuscript was first published in 2020, 2023, 2024, and thereafter it seems to have vanished. Nobody took this up. And even after India and China have supposed to have normalized their ties, even then nobody seems to have picked this up. And even now, people are only focusing on that one line which the leader of the opposition raised. Whereas I think there are far more issues within the memoir and within the whole handling of the Eastern Ladakh crisis that the media should raise and question. But Karan, I don't, knowing the kind of big media that we have and the kind of mainstream journalism that we have, I really don't have high hopes that they're going to hold the political leadership to account or raise tough questions. Generally, the media's behavior towards the political leadership and the military has not been critical or not been examining in a tough manner. We saw this, Karan, when you interviewed me for the Op Sindoor, what happened on the first night, how many fighter jets India lose on the first night, etc., etc. There's almost a desire to project the government's narrative and not ask any critical question. Now, what that does is that it really harms the military, it really harms the government, because it does not allow the armed forces or the government to take corrective action, because it's not under any pressure then to take corrective action. When you report honestly, when you report on things that have gone wrong, especially after a passage of certain time, it allows you to put the spotlight on those institutions which need to improve and which need to do better than they have done.
So we have two conclusions, don't we, Sushant Singh? General Naravane's book has not been published officially because it shows up the government in a poor light, and maybe the Prime Minister himself in particular. And the media has not pursued this because the media lacks the courage and the strength and the capacity to hold the government to account.
I find hard to disagree with you on this, Karan.
Finally, your last point is, I would say, arguably devastating. You write that what is being protected is not national security, but the illusion of control. And given everything that you've revealed, the political abdication, the territorial concessions, the suppression of information, the media silence, what mechanism exists in our country to hold the government to account? What recourse do we as Indian citizens have when our government keeps us deliberately in the dark?
So, Karan, if you are asking me, political theory says there are three types of democratic institutions. There's vertical accountability, there's horizontal accountability, there's diagonal or discursive accountability. Vertical accountability is to the people. People can raise questions during elections. People can vote government out. People can hold the government to account in a vertical manner. In the horizontal manner, there are other institutions, which are the institutions of the state, like the Supreme Court or the High Court, like the auditors' body, like the Parliament, parliamentary committees. They can raise questions and they can ask statutory bodies. They can ask questions of the government and hold the government to account. I don't have high hopes from these bodies, whether it is the Parliament or the court. Maybe some of them may, but it's unlikely that they will ask those questions. Now, that only leaves institutions of discursive accountability or diagonal accountability, and they are essentially what? Civil society organizations and journalism or media. Civil society organizations in this case also includes think tanks, and I think it is in that domain, the domain of civil society, where journalists and think tanks and analysts operate, that these questions should perhaps be raised or could perhaps be raised. And it would be nice if journalists and think tankers and analysts and civil society organizations were to raise those questions, which would inform the public, and then public can hold the government vertically accountable. That's the only way I can think of it.
They should raise the questions. The problem is they aren't. The problem is they're probably refusing to do so.
Yeah, I think Karan, most of them are operating in the dosti bane rahe mode, so they don't want to. So they don't want to do that.
Sushant Singh, I thank you for the time you've given me. I thank you for agreeing to do this program to explain to the Indian people not just the contents of your essay, but more importantly, the revelations that you have highlighted from General Narawane's book. And I'll underline that General Narawane was army chief at the time. He clearly knows what he's talking about. Sadly, that book has not been allowed to be sold to the Indian people. We, at the end of the day, are the ones who lose. Thank you very much indeed. Take care. Stay safe.
Thank you so much, Karan. As always, a pleasure talking to you. Thanks a lot.
Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch The Interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me.